So, Ryan, in 2018, Sony put a hexen on the world in the form of the PlayStation Classic, something that was notorious by many people as not very good. What did you think of the PS1 Classic? I don't think it's as bad as people really claimed it was. It obviously wasn't as good as it should have been, but I don't think it was like that bad. What do you think about it?
I liked it for what it was, which is a novelty. There is kind of that certain level of wanting it to be like perfect, and I get it, especially if you're asking $100 for the thing. But in the same veins of other mini consoles, you kind of mess with it for a little bit, and then it becomes a showpiece, or you put it on display. And it was a very cool little authentic PS1. To actually sit down and play the games on it, to judge the library, that's a totally different beast, and I see where people are coming from. But at least when it dropped down in price to like, what was it, $25 or something, even lower, that was a steal to me.
Yeah, that's the price I got mine for. I got mine for $20 at Best Buy.
Yeah, it was Best
and
Buy.
At that point, why not? There's absolutely no reason not to go for that. It's 20 games overall, 2 controllers, 2 USB controllers. It's so emulation, but overall, I feel like most people could kind of like plug that in, have a decent time with it, and that's that. However, I think the game lineup was one of the bigger things people had a problem with. It's not a bad game lineup at all, but I think a lot of people just kind of had a bit of a problem with that representing the entirety of the PS1 generation.
I thought it was fine. It's just a bit of an issue to only do 20. You're not going to hit them all. You're not going to please everybody. That's why if we're going to theorize about a possible PlayStation 2, that's going to be even harder because the library's just too massive. And then you have franchises, right, that have multiple releases on that platform. Then it begs the question of which one do you pick?
The PS1, it was a monumental success, one of the best-selling consoles, the best-selling console at the time. It had so many games on it and so many classics that limiting it to 20, hell, even 30 is pretty much impossible to please everybody with that, especially because so many of its classics were third-party titles and so many were first-party. That's where I feel like Nintendo probably has it a little easier with picking games for their mini consoles. When it's a Nintendo console, it's just kind of like, oh, I mean, like, you have the first-party Nintendo games and you can kind of get a couple third parties here and there, and you're golden. Sony, it's definitely a lot trickier because they have a much wider, like, assortment of games that appeal to all different kinds of people. It is really hard to kind of nail down this perfect lineup. The PlayStation Classic, I think it was just kind of missing a couple of like bigger games from that generation that, you know, you have obviously, you know, the Crash and Spyros, Tomb Raider. Those are kind of at least like some of the big ones where it's just like, where are those? Those really help define the PS1 generation. When it comes to a PlayStation 2 Classic, that's where it becomes a lot trickier. I don't think this is ever going to happen. I don't think we're technologically there for it to be at a decent price with a decent amount of games and 2 controllers and all that stuff, but one can dream. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to kind of like debate, kind of theorize what games would make sense on a PlayStation 2 Classic. What can we maybe see appearing on one if one theoretically was announced? So how many games do you think we would go for here? How many games do you think would be preloaded? Do you think they would go for 20 again? Maybe a little more? Maybe less? Because these are bigger games. Nintendo went from 30 with the NES Classic to 20, 21 with the SNES Classic, and Sony just did an even 20.
There's no way you're doing less. I mean, you're right. They would never do it. At least not anytime soon. It would not be a price that I think people would be happy with. So you'd have another PS1 Classic situation. You can't do less than 20 though. There's just too many. You could probably bump it up to like 30 or 40, even 50, and cast a pretty wide net, I think, on some of the heavy hitters. But to speak to, I think, the widest audience possible with PlayStation 2, it's just a monumental task that's never going to hit like some of the more obscure titles or even maybe licensed stuff that people were young and fondly remember, right? But I think 20 to 30, you still get a reasonable amount, assuming they secure them. As long as there's no obvious missing titles that you think should be there, like the PS1 Classic. But it's licensing. Licensing is going to be the issue here. That's Sony's biggest hurdle. They can't dip into, like you said, they can't dip into the first-party piggy bank quite as frequently. Or I think they can, but it's not going to fill out the library nearly as much.
But I think with these mini consoles, the entire appeal of them is kind of like it's a best of lineup of sorts. Like Nintendo could have dug into just every single little thing they have for their mini consoles. Like on the NES, they could have pulled from like all those horrible black box sports games they had back then. And it's something, but they didn't. They kind of went for stuff like Mega Man 2 and Final Fantasy and all of that. So Sony could very easily put all the Buzz games on this PS2 Classic. I think they know better than that, and I think they kind of go for the traditional games that just people enjoy. Maybe a couple sports games here and there, but overall, like you were saying, licensing would be the biggest problem with that. I'm looking at a list of the best PS2 games of all time, and I'm already seeing some that, like are classics that this is like Burnout 3 that almost needs to be on there, but like the amount of licensed music tracks in that game, that would make that game itself a nightmare to re-release, and it would just be a part of the package.
I'd say right away we're not looking at things like any racing titles. Well, to like that, like I would put Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec on this thing, but Need for Speed Underground or Burnout, SSX has a lot of tracks in it, right? There's no original music in there. Like Tony Hawk's Underground, like no doubt, I think they should be on there. I don't think we can even humor those games having a chance of being on this thing.
Well, first off, I wanna ask you, because you say Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec should be on there. Now, I've only played Gran Turismo 4, and 4 was kind of like a big, wow, this is a powerhouse on the PS2 at the time. Why would you pick 3 A-Spec over 4?
Because it's the best-selling one. It's just the biggest Gran Turismo. And that's where I guess it's a tough struggle, right? Do you go with the most sort of iconic, or do you go with what is just the better game? One could argue you obviously go better, but the first PS1 Classic had weird choices like that.
It's interesting because I'd say like a game like Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, like you said, since it's the best selling, more PS2 players will probably look at that and remember it. It probably feels a lot more like the era of like the PS2, like it's just kind of like, oh man, yeah, this is a PS2 game. And Gran Turismo 4 still feels like that, but it was very impressive. It was a much later game, so it felt like very impressive at the time. I believe there's like a bunch of like, is it at least like 720p, like 720i or something like that?
Yeah, you just jogged my memory. I think maybe GT4 would be a bit more appropriate given it does 1080i. I'm fairly certain that's one of the few PS2 games that'll do it. That and like Tourist Trophy or something.
Is 720i even a thing? Did I just make that up? Jesus.
That's a good point though, because there's some PS2 games that have like native widescreen support. So for what would be kind of a modern HDMI device, like you'd maybe want to also think about that.
3 A-Spec is still kind of like, I mean, like that was like the first Gran Turismo on PS2. More iconic. It's something where it's just like, yeah, Gran Turismo 4 is better and looks better, but if you're kind of going back to that era of Gran Turismo, does that really matter? All right, what would you say? What would you say would your final answer be for which one to pick there?
Well, I wrote 3 down because I thought that would be it. I think that would be their decision. Might be divisive, but I think that's what they would ultimately settle on. So I think as a jumping off point then, in terms of iconic versus quality, like I think one of the really tough decisions here would be which Grand Theft Auto. That's a tough one. Now I know what I would want, and I know it's not going to get picked. I would do San Andreas.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I would pick San Andreas as well. I was thinking you would be a Vice City guy.
No, I loved San Andreas.
I did love San Andreas too. It is my favorite of the bunch. It is like in that nice middle ground between like the PS2 era of Grand Theft Auto and then the modern era of Grand Theft Auto. It really did take Grand Theft Auto to the next level of like GTA 3 was like this big evolutionary step into 3D, but then San Andreas was like this even bigger step into like, it is huge. It is still huge. It's something where I can still play that game and just have the most fun. It is so much fun. Whereas a game like 3 and Vice City, they're still great games, but you know, they still feel more primitive in comparison to what San Andreas did, which it's insane how much they were able to do in that PS2 era. But 3 was kind of like that changed everything when it came out.
And that is why I think they would pick 3.
It would also be easier to just put on there, you know, smaller, a little easier, not as controversial.
For how meaningful it was, it's just the most primitive in the series. Like it's got the lowest track list, obviously, which would make it a bit easier to get over. It's just a smaller game, and it is unfortunately the importance of that outpaces the hassle of getting Vice City or San Andreas on there. I would prefer San Andreas. That, I think, in terms of the iconic versus what's just the best game in that particular series, I think we're going with 3 on that one.
I think that makes the most sense. It is something where you have like huge amounts of games from all these iconic series on the PS2, where you have multiple Final Fantasies, multiple Grand Theft Autos, multiple from Sony themselves, where you have Jak, Ratchet, God of War, where it's just like, yeah, which ones do you pick? I feel like they'd pick Grand Theft Auto 3. Because, I mean, like, the same with the PS1 Classic. They could have picked Grand Theft Auto 2. I'm not as familiar with the top-down, the first 2 top-down Grand Theft Auto, so I don't necessarily know, like, how much better GTA 2 is compared to GTA 1. I feel like they kind of picked the big leap forward rather than, like, the best overall title. What other of like the franchises do you want to hit next?
We could get into first party because there's a fair amount there, and it's the same sort of argument of, what game do you pick in each series, but to sort of, I guess, jump into, because I think we can kind of just nail all these right here, which is the 3 iconic PlayStation 2 platformers: Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter. Now, for my money, just do the first game on all of them, they're all going on there. I think that's like full stop. They have to be on there. They got their story base too. I don't think it really works to do 2 or 3 out of any of them. Just do the first ones.
They don't have any excuse this time, like they did with the PS1 Classic and Crash and Spyro, because they still fully own these IPs. Which ones would you say are like the best of the bunch? Because I've only played a bit of each of the Jak and Daxter games. Also, the Lost Frontier. So I've dabbled in all of them, but I haven't gone through enough of them to really feel like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to like picking which one. Which one would you personally pick of the Jak games?
My favorite's Jak 2. But the Jak's interesting because game 2 and 3 are just substantially different from 1. So that, I guess, would be the only weird. That's kind of an outlier, right? There's no way you'd put 2 or 3 on there. And in terms of quality, it really depends on who you ask. Some people they're like, I love Jak 1. I hate what they did after. I like what they did after.
What about Jak X? That would be almost kind of like a weird thing where you could do Jak 1 and then Jak X, where it's just like this immediate change and stuff. But you get a different genre. It would be kind of an interesting addition.
Yeah, you want maybe at least 2 racing games, but I don't think you'd do Jak X. I'd take it, though. I would, if we're doing a PS2 classic for me, then I want Jak X on there.
I do think you're right when it comes to these games, since they're all like story based, like the games genuinely like progress through each title. Yeah, it would make sense to kind of put the first one of each series on there.
I think those 3 are just easy to sort of say they're going on there.
Do we do both Eco and Shadow of the Colossus? Or do we only pick one or other?
I only put Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah. Eco is a bit more of kind of like it's just not as iconic, or it didn't leave as much of an impact to Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, that's why I went with it. Yeah. It's not like I don't think it wouldn't make sense, though. Like, if for whatever reason this thing actually came out and they put Ico on there, not Shadow of the Colossus, I'd be like, okay, well, that's good, too. Because I think that game should get some exposure every now and again for just how sort of unusual it was at the time and how unconventional it was.
They did the HD collection on PS3, so it's just like, they do kind of at least group those games together. So I feel like it is something where, like, if they had an extra slot open, then they'd include Eco as well. Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna pick one over the other, it would have to be Shadow. Do you think any Resident Evil would appear on there? Because Resident Evil 4 was, always a GameCube exclusive.
You consider it like a game. It feels like a GameCube game.
Resident Evil did appear on the PS1 Classic, and it was originally a PlayStation series. It kind of started as that, and then during this generation, it's mostly Nintendo. We did have a couple Resident Evil games on PS2, but I don't like Light Gun stuff. What else did they?
I'm not an RE expert here, but I did put 4 on here. We can like go over the semantics all day about, but it was a GameCube exclusive, and it's just not going to take away from how it's a game that a lot of people played on PS2.
It would be kind of like if they put like Chrono Trigger on the PS1 Classic. I look at that as a Super Nintendo game. Though a lot of people played it on the PS1, it had a lot of cool extra features on the PS1, like cutscenes.
Cool features like cutscenes.
They were big!
Yeah.
They were big. That was a big addition.
Deal.
I would say it would be a nice addition to a PS2 Classic, though it would be kind of like if Nintendo would do a GameCube Classic, that's where it would really feel at home, though I don't know if Nintendo would want to do an M-rated mini console. Sony, PS1 Classic was M-rated, so...
I will say if it was missing, I would be okay with it. But I think if we're framing it as what Sony would do, I think it would be on there.
I think that makes sense. I'll put it on for now, but it might be the first to go.
Put it on the maybe
we
list.
Have to cut it down. Yeah. Going with other third parties, Square Enix has a lot of big games on the PS2. I'm mainly looking at Final Fantasy. We also have Dragon Quest VIII and Kingdom Hearts.
I left Dragon Quest off, but I put Final Fantasy X on there.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do anything, it would have to be Final Fantasy X. It's 11. That's just that ain't gonna work. What are you gonna do with that?
Well, there's 12, but
yeah, there's 12, but 10 is more iconic.
I don't know about
PS2,
I think pound for pound, you're going 10. I love 10 as well, so I think it's kind of an easy W.
You left off Dragon Quest VIII, but Kingdom Hearts, I think the first Kingdom Hearts would make the most sense. With licensing and all of that, it becomes a little trickier, because now you have Disney involved.
I don't think that would be too bad, though.
I don't think it would either. You know, these companies are willing to play ball. It is something where I look at like a company like Nintendo, and that's when they're kind of like, we don't want to put licensed games or anything like that on our mini consoles and whatnot. Where Sega with their Genesis Mini, like they put like Disney games on there, they put Tetris on there and all that stuff. You know, they went all over the place. Didn't Square lose the original Kingdom Hearts data? And that's why they had to remake it?
The source code?
Yeah, would that pose an issue?
Well, they would emulate it, but because this would all be emulation. A lot of those companies, a lot of Japanese companies are like adverse to emulation. I don't know. I don't want to like speak broadly or at least make assumptions here, but I know some developers don't feel comfortable actually like going down that path. Like some re-releases, they kind of have to not emulate the original game and do something completely different, just to sort of appease the IP holder of like, we didn't emulate it, you know, we did something else. I think that was Frank Civaldi from the Video Game History Foundation talking about that.
Yeah, so that's just something I remembered in regards to like 1.5 HD. That's just something that kind of came up as like, oh, would that pose an issue? But
well, that's what happened with the PS1 Classic. They just pulled a bunch of ISOs from, what was it, online or something, right? They just they just got basic ones. They didn't even do anything crazy.
And I'll put it on. In terms of the current lineup that we have, in terms of genre representation, because I think that's another big thing, is there anything that we are sorely missing that we should put on?
Well, we're missing a fighter. I would do Tekken 5. I'm not a fighting game person, therefore I feel like I'm not the person to ask as to what game should be on, like what fighting game should be. I feel like Tekken 5's a pretty well-known PS2 fighter, but I could be way off the mark with the fighting game community. I was just kind of thinking, and I'm like, oh, Tekken 5.
I think like what there was like some 3D Street Fighter game. EX3 was on the PS2. It got a 1 out of 5 on Next Generation magazines.
I do have another fighter on here. I don't think it would happen, but I put DBZ Budokai 3.
Throwing in all kinds of licenses.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Playing fast and loose.
I think Tekken 5. I'm cool with Tekken 5. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Maybe we put DBZ 3 in the maybe pile.
I'll put that in the low end of the maybe pile. Was that a later PS2 game too? Because it did come out on Wii as well.
Yeah, it was probably like 2005. Well, this is also like when Tenkaichi was like going to be a thing, right?
I know a bit about the DBZ games, but I'm not a DBZ guy, so I'm not sure. One thing that I'm not sure about, puzzle games. Because they made sure to include some puzzle games on the PS1 Classic. What is an iconic and notable PS2 puzzle game?
Well, this is where you got me, because I don't have anything on there. Not on my list.
Well, I mean, like, Fantavision.
Oh, God. Okay, now, if we're being honest, that would be a Sony move. That would be so questionable. Like, oh, here's the PS2 Classic. We've only got 20 games. Fantavision.
I think it makes sense.
You're,
I think
you're
it's
not
something
wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, it does seem like something they would do. Because that's one of the PS2 games that released for PS4, right?
Yes, as a PS2 Classic.
And it's a launch title, too.
Good point. Fantavision stands are psyched right now.
You get your one puzzle game and I'll shut up. I'll shut up after this. And I think we're good. We have Fighter, Puzzle. What else are we missing? I'm thinking we're missing like a first-person shooter.
I have Killzone on here, but I don't think Killzone 1 in particular is really that. If we're going to leave certain first-party games off it, it would probably be Killzone. But that is a first-party FPS.
I think the Killzone series really like came into its own around like Killzone 2.
I mean, it was like good. It was okay, but it yeah.
But it's just it's not like, oh man, I remember the PS2 so fondly, Killzone, and like it's just like it's not one of those games that you mentioned. But I do think it kind of fills a niche because what other first-person games are on the
Call of
PS2
Duty
that are like
Medal of Honor?
Nobody's pulling Call of Duty Big Red One on the PS2 Classic.
Between the two, though, I'm not picking Medal of Honor. I'm sorry, like I'm just not. So,
what about Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts on the PS2?
Interesting choice. Very bold.
Yeah.
One that I don't think would happen.
It's not a good one either. It's just that's. Have you ever played that one
on PlayStation 2? No.
It's strange. It's its own game. They made a specific companion title for World at War only on PS2.
It's not like wasn't there a Wii version too?
Yeah, but the Wii version is just World at War.
Oh, really? So it's completely unique?
Yeah, the PS2 one they just gave they made a completely unique game for the PS2.
Well, great. Now I got it.
That's it. You're welcome. It's fun.
Well, so it's not an FPS, but I do have SOCOM 3.
I feel like when you're comparing Killzone to SOCOM, even though SOCOM is not an FPS, I feel like SOCOM makes more sense to appear on
yes,
the PS2 Classic.
I would say so.
So would you say SOCOM 3 be your pick for the list?
Well, this is where I'm just kind of using a little bit of guesswork and at least what I know, but I'm sure diehard community members can correct me, but I believe it was SOCOM 3 that was very popular.
We'll put it on there. That makes sense, even though it's not a first-person shooter. Now, next up, I don't know. I think Katamari Damacy.
I'm so happy you said that. I was going to say, there's a distinct lack of weird in here.
Yeah.
And PS2's got plenty of it, and I'm telling you, it's Katamari.
I think Katamari is like, if you're gonna have one weird ass game on here, I think it's got to be Katamari, just because like it embodies the weirdness of the 6th generation.
100%, man. 100%. I'm so glad you knew Katamari had to be on here.
I mean, there's also We Love Katamari, but I think you just do the first one.
First one's fine.
I mean, like a lot of the Katamari games are pretty much it's just like it's just another good Katamari game. So it's just like you can kind of pick and choose whatever you want. But
yeah,
I'll choose Katamari Damacy. What about Bully? Do you think Bully needs to be on there, or do you think GTA 3 should be kind of like our main Rockstar game?
I don't hate the idea of it, but I think that just, not to say it like this, but I think it clogs up the list with having 2 Rockstar games.
I think that's the main reason why I was a little kind of like in the maybe era for Resident Evil 4, just because like its legacy is so much more than just like, oh man, this was on the PS2 kind of thing. Because Bully, very shortly after went to 360 and Wii and all of that. Not that it has to be an exclusive to be on here. Yeah, I just feel like GTA 3, it's just if you're gonna have your one Rockstar game, I think that makes sense. I think it'd be cool to have Bully on there. I wouldn't be against it, but
I don't hate the idea.
Looking at other like Sony published games, there's Dark Cloud and Dark Cloud 2.
That was a maybe in my list that I left off. I guess going back to driving. Not a racer, but it fills a very specific hole here, which is Twisted Metal Black.
It was just kind of like, wow, the next generation is here. Wow, this is like a big step forward. I
think when you ship 4 Twisted Metals on PS1, or actually 5 if we count that like game where it's like a bunch of little mini ones or whatever, at that point leading into PS2, it was like really eye-opening to see Twisted Metal on PlayStation 2. And it fills a very specific genre. I would say that's one that should be on there.
What were some other games that you put on your list?
Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening on there is kind of a action hack and slash.
I think that makes all the sense in the world to have at least a Devil May Cry game on it. Pretty much either 1 or 3. It is something where I do like kind of taking at least kind of like, oh man, like something other than the first one every now and then. Even though you could pick either 1 or 3. At least from my perspective. What else did you have?
Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. So again, kind of in the same scope of, it's not that like first entry. Well, in this case, it wouldn't be MGS1, but if we're picking between 2 and 3, it seems like 3 would probably be the one that you're going to go with.
We still have space for Killzone, but I only have 3 spots left.
I know, now we have to be a little picky here. I have Persona 3 FES.
Okay, so not Persona 4.
Yeah, first Persona was on PS1 Classic.
What is your reasoning behind Persona 3 and not 4?
I think it's more of and this is going to sound dumb, but I hope people know what I mean. It's more of a PS2 game. So Persona 4 was a pretty late life cycle PS2 game. It was like released into 7th gen. And I feel like Persona 4, you hear it, and well, nowadays it's on everything. But before it was like, yes, that's the reason you buy a PS Vita. And same with 3, but 3 just feels more like a, I don't know, PlayStation 2 game. And many argue that they prefer the story of 3.
Now, we are lacking the God of War titles. I think you do God of War 1. I mean, you could do 2, but I think 1 makes sense.
I wouldn't think it's like unusual for 2 to be on there and not 1.
Yeah, I mean, 2 was like a but
it was a great game.
I mean, we could use the argument of like the Persona 4 argument like you had where God of War 2 came out in like 2007.
I know the walls are already crumbling down on me, but I mean, I wouldn't hate either, basically.
I am looking at like potentially other fighting games. Soul Calibur 3 was exclusive to PS2.
Wait, 3 was
I don't think it would be
exclusive?
Yeah, it's very weird.
Am I thinking of 2 where it was on and it had the exclusive characters?
Yeah, 2 was on Xbox and GameCube and had like Link on GameCube and Spawn, I think, on Xbox.
Yeah.
Which is why it was so weird that Sony like made sure they were like 3 has got to be exclusive, because that kind of took a lot of the fun from Soul Calibur 2 away. Could do that. Not saying we have to. More so just bringing up as like, hey, this was a exclusive game on PS2 back in the day.
I mean, I'm not a fighting game person, so I don't know if it's just me that wouldn't remember it that well, but because we haven't talked about it this whole time and had to look it up, I feel like the answer is right there. Like, it wouldn't be on there.
That is true. What about a sports game? What about a sports game?
No.
No, I mean, like, okay. What do you consider, like, cool borders?
Like I said earlier, though, I think it would be... I think good options would be things like SSX 3 or Tony Hawk's Underground, but you've got a licensing issue.
What if they just replaced all the music with just fun little like stock music or something? Would you accept that?
Not at all. That's like it's. I don't even think it's an exaggeration to say. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's half the game.
I'm just wondering, like, from a hypothetical perspective, if you would have accepted that. I'm just like, all right, they take out all the license track, they replace it with like Kevin MacLeod in Computech, .com stuff,
like Final Cut sound effects.
Or I mean, it could be like good quality stuff. Like I played Hi-Fi Rush last night, and they had like a streamer mode where it replaced like licensed tracks with stuff that had like the same beat as like the licensed stuff. So what if they do something like that?
The problem is a compromise like that would make me irrationally angry, and I know I'm not alone. So
yeah,
it's half the game.
Yeah.
It's already bad when like sometimes a port like that gets announced, like we're bringing back iconic game X, Y, and Z, and like one track's missing, and then Twitter blows up. They're like, where is this track? So if you even so much as touch like more than like 4 or 5 songs, you're already in trouble.
Well, that brings up another point. Outside of the sports games, or like sports in quotes games, there's rhythm games. So there is Parappa 2.
I would have said Guitaru Man.
I don't know much about Guitaru Man. You want to sell me on Guitaru Man?
Well, this is like the divergence though. Like I would probably take Parappa over it, but I think more would probably prefer Guitaru.
What if in a weird way you get one accessory with this thing? You get one accessory. You could do Taiko, Guitar Hero, a DDR, whatever. Would you still do like Parappa or Gitaru.
This changes the game. This changes the game.
Or an iToy game.
They include a whole accessory for a single entry in the library.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out a hypothetical here.
Let me humor your hypothetical. You do a Guitar Hero game, that's going to look dumb on store shelves.
It's a mini guitar. It can be a mini guitar. It can be a mini one. Yeah, it's a mini console. You get a mini guitar.
If there was an accessory, Sony's going iToy. That is what they're going to do. You're going to get iToy Play.
That would be kind of easy. I mean, like, you just get a little webcam in there or something. I mean, like...
Sure.
I think they could probably do that. Or, if they just have USB ports on it, which they already have on the PS1 Classic, you could just plug in a...
they say just get your own... Go on eBay, loser, get your own iToy.
I would be down for that. If it's included as a bonus. If it's just like, hey, you get 20 games, 21 and all the iToy life. Yeah, 21 games. The secret game is iToy Play 2. Or 3, because we never got that here in North America.
Do we even hit the 20 yet, or we're already stipulating a 21?
When we mentioned God of War, we got up to... I'm on game number 19, so we need 2 more to fill up 20. That's what's tricky. That's why I'm going like... Okay, sports, rhythm... What video game genres are we missing?
I've got one. Ace Combat 5. The Unsung War.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, that's the one in there that, sure, it fills a genre. Most people, not going to touch it.
I like that, though. I think that's fun. I am looking at this list, though. 20 is not enough for PS2.
It's not.
Because, like, I look at this list, and I'm just like, this is a good list. This is a good list. But it does look kind of lacking, though, you know? Like, it's something where it's just like...
I think there's too much.
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, I'll put down Ace Combat.
I also had Okami, Beyond Good and Evil. Actually, you know what? Hold on. I think we filled it, and you're going to have to talk me out of it. Silent Hill 2.
Okay. Yeah. So, I would say with Silent Hill, we didn't get that on PS1 Classic. I believe,
no,
right? Yeah.
Not the first one.
That was one of the big ones. They are not alike, but I feel like we do Silent Hill 2 instead of RE4.
Oh, this guy with the switch up wants to exchange it. He wants to exchange it.
Silent Hill 2 is more of a PS2 game than Resident Evil 4 is to me.
I think you want to protect the GameCube sanctity.
Not necessarily. It's more so like I look at Resident Evil 4, and that's either a GameCube game or that's a game for damn near everything. You know, it's something where it's just like it's a game for everything first, and then I think of it as like, oh yeah, GameCube game, yeah, sure.
Those are real OGs look at that game and they think it's a Wii game.
I do too, personally, as well. I mean, like, I mainly played it on Wii. I feel like Silent Hill 2 is more of a PS2 game than Resident Evil 4 is.
I'm not completely against your proposition, but then I think we're missing another horror. I think 2 horror games is good.
What about this is gonna be a Rule of Rose.
I knew you were gonna say Rule of Rose. I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah.
Just destroy all the secondhand market.
Sony did. I looked it up. Sony did publish it in Japan, so at least kind of has that like a bit of like.
Oh, they've got some leverage.
Yeah, they do. How about this? I'm getting rid of Resident Evil 4. And
that game never had a shot. The second we put it on there.
Final 20th. We could do another horror game, or we could go for a genre that has been woefully lacking on this list.
What genre would that be?
Sports. Sports was huge on PS2.
You're really pushing for sports.
I think we need to have at least one. I'm not gonna be. I will show you this. This is fun. This is a PS3. This is an old PS3. With a demo for NBA Elite 11 downloaded onto it. I found it on eBay.
I'm always interested in PS3, so bring that up, bring it closer.
It is not a backwards compatible model. It is.
No, it's not.
Yeah. But it has a demo for the canceled NBA Elite 11 on it, which is pretty fun. And that's the only time when I really find sports games kind of interesting.
I'm not sure. Cool, a little offside thing there. I'm not sure how this is relevant to what we're.
It was on the ground. And we were talking about sports games.
So you weren't. That wasn't actually getting to a point, right? Like,
I've been bragging about it for a little bit now. I have a PS3 with a canceled sports game demo downloaded onto it. But yeah, I don't know what kind of sports game that would even pick. I think like an SSX game would make the most sense. SSX 3 or SSX Tricky. It's EA, so you get your EA sports game technically.
Why not Beautiful Joe?
That is true, but I also kind of view that more as a GameCube game.
I knew you were going to say that.
It launched on GameCube.
There's a PSP one, Scott. Doesn't that mean there's more entries on PlayStation than Nintendo?
No, I think didn't the PSP one also... Oh, God. I gotta look this up.
There's just 1, 2 in the PSP one, isn't there?
Red Hot Rumble is also a GameCube game.
It came out on GameCube too?
That's a weird platform list. It's GameCube and PSP only.
I did not know there was a PSP version.
That is strange. I was thinking of there's Beautiful Joe Double Trouble on the DS. That's what I had to look up.
Oh, there is a DS one, isn't there?
There's more games than I think a lot of people.
Really? Is there more that I'm not realizing here?
No, it's just 4 overall.
Oh.
You got the first 2 and then Red Hot Rumble and then Double Trouble. I view Beautiful Joe as more of a GameCube title.
How about Mario Sunshine?
Yeah. What about Mech Assault on the Xbox?
Billy Hatcher.
I would push for SSX. I think that kind of evens out the list a little bit, unless you have a different option. There's also
I had it on here.
Splitters.
I just think there's licensing problems. Now you said Time Splitters, right?
Yeah, you could also replace
Sure.
all the music in SSX with stock music. I think sure, Time Splitters. There's also a couple different Time Splitters games, but you also get that is our first person shooter. I feel like that might be kind of the more like, I hear more people talk about Time Splitters than they do Killzone on the PS2.
You know what would be a really weird choice for an FPS?
What do we got?
Half-Life.
Yeah, the PS2 version. It's not a bad version either for the time.
But it would be if we're
does the job.
Gonna get into like the semantics of like what feels like a PlayStation 2 game. I think that's got no shot.
Yeah, I mean, like we could do any of like the weird ports on there. Could do Boogie on the PS2. But that is the list that we have kind of come up here. Do you have any objections? Do you have any additions you'd want to make? How does this look with the general list you put together yourself?
Well, my list has 25 because I knew we were gonna, kind of cycle some things in and out and figure this thing out together. So I think by counsel of 2 people, we came to a pretty good final list. Made some compromises. Some I'm not happy with, but it's what happens. I somehow got Ace Combat on there, so I guess I can't complain.
You get your weird little aircraft game, and you should be happy.
Yeah, I can't argue if that's going to be on there.
I think it kind of represents kind of the amount of different games you get during the PS2 era. A lot of these types of games didn't appear nearly as much, into the next generation, and especially into the 8th generation. So I think it fits on the list.
I had Okami on there, which did not make the cut. It's probably not going to make people happy. Beyond Good and Evil, did I say that one?
Yeah.
DBZ Budokai 3, which would have been cool, but
that would have been cool. You can say anything. I could say the Disney's Haunted Mansion game would have been cool or something. And
Bionicle,
Lego Racers 2. There's all kinds of things. If they did a PSP classic, the Napoleon Dynamite game.
Yeah, the Family Guy game. I'm okay with what we came to.
Too.
I don't think I want to wiggle anything out of there for something else.
I think that's a fair. I think it's a fair list if we're sticking to 20. But I think like I said, it does look like it does feel like it's just like, man, if there's like 10 or 20 more slots, then this would feel kind of like the ultimate. I feel like that would kind of feel like the ultimate, like, we got this console. We got this console in the bag. Like, it's just like, boom, we got it. We got it nailed down.
I think 50 would be great, but 20 is a nice solid list to make plenty of people angry, which I think we've done successfully here.
Yeah, exactly.